I'm going to be doing weekly reactions and reviews. Make sure to watch the next episode of the weekly. Hey y'all. Welcome to episode 2? 9 years ago, in September of 2013, I started a series on this YouTube channel called The Most Disturbing Films of All Time, in which, as the name suggests, I would watch and then review films that are regularly regarded as the most disturbing film. The first episode was Serbian film, and at some point I changed my mind, took down the video, lost the video, recently found the video again, and thought, you know what? I should have continued that series. So, if you'll indulge me, let's do just that. Now, this is a list of films we'll cover in no particular order, and I should add, if there's something on this list you want me to do next, or something not on this list that you really think should be, then leave a comment letting me know so I can try to fit it in. Last decade's episode, I said that next week we would cover the controversial, classic found footage piece, and so, here it is finally, Cannibal Holocaust.
Written by Gianfranco Clerici and directed by Ruggero Deodato, 1980's Cannibal Holocaust is an Italian exploitation horror film with early elements of the found footage genre of horror. The film is essentially split into two parts. The first part follows anthropologist Harold Monroe, played by adult film actor Robert Kerman, as he travels into the depths of the Amazon rainforest in an attempt to contact and communicate with indigenous people that have little to no contact with the, quote, civilized world. His goal is to learn the fate of 4 journalist filmmakers who had previously traveled there to make a documentary about the cannibal tribes. After discovering that the 4 filmmakers, led by the passionate and eccentric Alan Yates, have been brutally killed, Dr. Monroe manages to recover their footage and take it back to New York. The second half of the film shows this found footage, occasionally intercutting conversations with Monroe and a group of television producers hoping to use the footage for a documentary. However, as the footage continues, we see that Yates and his crew care little for the people they are dealing with, fabricating terror and drama for the sake of their phony documentary, which we are told is not the first time they have done this in their career, committing violence and other horrific acts, and that their deaths were ultimately caused by their own cruelty and hubris.
Considering the budget and time period and exploitation genre and the almost amateur cast and crew, Cannibal Holocaust has like really good shot composition and cinematography and editing. The whole thing, or not the whole thing, but most of it was actually filmed on location in the Amazon rainforest in Colombia, and the movie really benefits from that. Visually, this movie's pretty decent. And the special effects and makeup effects, which of course in 1980 were all practical, really hold up. The special effects are great in this movie, and they definitely still hold up today. There are moments watching this movie, a handful of moments where, your brain, the whole thing's fake, but your eyes are screaming at you that what you're looking at is real. It's really good, and the creative kind of cowboy switches they do to get you to the effects, definitely work. It's a nice touch. The special effects are excellent in this movie. I can see why it's so influential. I mean, there's a lot of filmmakers and special effects artists that have cited Cannibal Holocaust as the reason they got into this. Without Cannibal Holocaust, there is no Eli Roth, there are no Hostel movies. Without Cannibal Holocaust, there is no Toe Tag production and no August Underground movies, which yes, we will do later on in this series. Another part of the legacy of this film is the whole found footage movie thing. Now, being totally candid here, I will fight against people calling this movie the first found footage film, because it's not presented as a found footage movie. Not really. It uses conventional cinematography and conventional editing and conventional shots and scene placement. Like, the movie is clearly a fictional movie. Allegedly, some people thought that just the Alan Yates and his crew, the found footage in the film part, that just that part was actually found footage, but to be blunt, not to be offensive, you have to be pretty naive to actually think any of it, including that part, is actually found footage. That said, though, credit where it's due, Cannibal Holocaust did establish and pioneer a lot of the elements that would become the found footage genre. It's reasonable to say without Cannibal Holocaust, there probably isn't a Blair Witch Project. So yeah, credit where it's due, or blame where it's due if you're one of those people that hates found footage movies. Unfortunately, that's about where my praise ends. Unlike episode 1, I'm a lot more critical about this movie, so now it's time to get into the next part. Although visually Cannibal Holocaust is pretty decent, audio-wise the same thing cannot be said. For reasons totally beyond me, this entire film uses really poor ADR. ADR, if you don't know, stands for Alternative Dialogue Replacement, and it's a practice that is used in all films, including massive, big-budget modern ones, where the audio that is actually filmed when a scene is done on set is later recorded over, dubbed over by audio recorded at a recording studio. And this is usually done to, get a better take, or to fix a problem with enunciation, or a problem with equipment. It's a totally normal thing. The issue, though, is that all of Cannibal Holocaust dialogue is done with ADR, and the ADR isn't really that good. The only way I can describe it is it's like one of those stereotypical kung fu movies with the bad English dub where the mouth just does not line up with the English words you're hearing.
Much. Half of the town, rice shops, tea shops, coffin shops, over 20 places.
Did you ever think of the Yakumo point of view, that we might be the ones who are savages?
Additionally, the acting in this film leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I understand in its context, it's an exploitation movie, independent, low budget, done in 1980. Even in that context, I think the acting could be better. Outside of Robert Kerman, who plays Harold Monroe, the anthropologist, or the actor who plays Jocko, the jungle guide, outside of those two, all the other acting in this movie is pretty low quality. I don't want to be too harsh on it, but it's not very good acting, and it's made all the worse by the terrible ADR. I have one other big critique of Cannibal Holocaust, but to get to that, we first have to talk about... There's one superlative used for Cannibal Holocaust that I will absolutely agree with, and that is the most controversial film of all time. Here, I've got some of the controversies written down. Let's read them. They include 6 different scenes depicting the real and often inhumane killing of animals, something that Deodato himself has since said he regrets and should not have done for this movie. Intense and realistic violence and multiple, even more intense and realistic depictions of rape, leading to an Italian court charging Deodato with murder until he showed them that the actors were in fact still alive. Dishonest and abusive treatment of the crew, both on set and afterwards, as several members of the cast and crew have claimed that they had to fight tooth and nail to get paid for the work they did. Additionally, the main actress, Francesca Ciardi, has said that she was essentially forced to spend much of the film topless or entirely nude, and that was not something that she was initially informed or consented to. And finally, mistreatment of the tribal extras, who were in fact real indigenous Amazonian people, including these people being functionally forced to remain inside a burning hut for far longer than could ever be considered safe, which leads into my final criticism of the film. When we consider these controversies, particularly the harmful and nearly deadly treatment of the indigenous extras, it calls into question the entire message of this film. Cannibal Holocaust on the surface presents itself as an honestly heavy-handed critique of sensationalist media, especially news media, and the Euro-American idea of indigenous people being savages. That an idea that, when done to its extent, dehumanizes these indigenous people so much that they are then befallen by the same savagery they are accused of committing. And yeah, that's a good message. I like that. But Cannibal Holocaust has 2 major issues with this. One, the film itself depicts indigenous people as savage cannibals, the very attitude that it later tries to call people bad for having. And number 2, we know that the production included the mistreatment of indigenous people. When the film shows us Alan Yates and his crew forcing indigenous people into a hut and setting it on fire and keeping it there until they almost die, it obviously paints that scene. It paints that as being a horrendous thing to do, that Yates and his crew are evil for doing that. But the problem is, Yates didn't do that. In our world, the real world, that was Ruggero Deodato that nearly killed those people by forcing them into that circumstance against their will. Cannibal Holocaust is the footage of the racist European mistreating indigenous people for the sake of sensational media. And I think that's my biggest problem with this movie. There's a tightrope you have to walk when you're doing movies like this, and this is going to come up again and again in this review series. And that tightrope is balancing shocking, provocative, disgusting, disturbing content in a way that illustrates a message. It makes you horrified and disgusted at something so that you leave recognizing the horrors of certain events or historical moments or practices or ideologies. But if you fall off that tightrope, you end up becoming the horror itself, and you disturb people for no reason, or worse, glorify the worst aspects of humanity. Cannibal Holocaust fails this balancing act. In one word, it's hypocritical. So yeah, I'm obviously not the biggest fan of this film, but I still think that every single fan of extreme cinema or exploitation cinema, or if you're just a fan of the history of horror movies, I absolutely recommend this movie, despite my many critiques about it. It is an important classic, incredibly influential, and if you can look past some of the acting and audio issues, it is a masterclass in special effects. It definitely deserves to be on the list of the most disturbing films of all time, but I don't think it should be in the top, and I do honestly think some of its hype is a little bit overstated. So that was Cannibal Holocaust. Now here's a new thing I'm doing. After each video, I'll rank them so that you get a good idea of how each one competes with the others in the category of disturbing. And here's that list again. If there's anything not on here that you think should be, or one you hope to see really soon, then leave a comment below. And if you want to stay up on these videos, go ahead and subscribe. I promise you episode 3 will not take 9 years to get to. Speaking of episode 3, next video I'll be reviewing the oldest film on the list and a classic that sparked an entire movement of shocking cinema. Thanks for watching.